Hi, today I thought I could talk about spirituality and like what does the word spirituality what does it mean? And I was thinking about it yesterday or a couple of days ago, and what came to me is that spirituality is the word spirit and duality combined. And we live in a dualistic world, which when that's conscious means the balance or the dance between masculine and feminine energies on the planet. But when that's more unconscious, that becomes us versus them mentalities, or I'm either overly attached to people or things, or I'm avoidant of certain people or things. And so, spirituality, I believe, is really the practice of aligning ourselves in spirit so that way we can take aligned action in the world that is based off of duality, right? Spirituality is finding neutrality, harmony, and balance between our masculine and feminine parts. So that way we're not overly absorbed or attached to people or not avoidant of certain people or certain things in our life, but we are able to face our experiences because we've returned to our wholeness of the spirit that we are. And so, really, when we're thinking about spirituality, spirituality is all about aligning ourselves in greater consciousness, greater awareness, so that way we can be more conscious and aware as we move through our world and live our life. And we are spirits having a human experience. We aren't humans trying to become enlightened or trying to become more spiritual. We are enlightenment. We are spirituality, going through what it's like to bring that into the play of earth. And so you're not, the goal of spirituality isn't enlightenment. The goal of spirituality is how deeply can I live in my humanness? How deeply can I bring the heaven that I am to earth to experience my greatest heavenly expression in this body? Right? You're not someone trying to get into heaven. You are heaven itself, trying to experience what it's like to feel your heavenliness through your senses of your body. And we were raised by like the world currently has forgotten a lot of its angelic or heavenly nature. And so if you're wondering, why don't I feel my heavenly nature? Or why don't I feel blissed out regularly? Well, how often are you actually taking time to connect with that aspect of yourself? Right? Because there's more than just your heavenly nature. Like your body remembers, isn't just connected to your soul, but it also has ties or connections to your past experiences. And if our past experiences were really painful or we had some trauma in our past, and then we continue to overseek pleasure, overseek altered states, overseek goals as a way of thinking this is going to bring me worth and value, all those perspectives are ignoring your connection to your soul. And so then we go through our life feeling rather in pain, suffering, and miserable because that's where our choices and our words are aligned in. And when we can align ourselves more in our angelic nature that we actually are, that is actually what brings our body to life, is when we start to feel more of that in our body more regularly, and it's a practice of connecting with it. And that doesn't mean I give all my power to my guides and I need to go meditate in a cave all day and ignore my human life. No, you are a spirit here to have a human experience, which means living as a human. It doesn't mean avoiding your humanness and trying to remember the spirit that you are, because it's not even something you're remembering, it's what you are. But the goal of our journey is how much can we harmonize our cells of our body to that energy of our soul in alignment with living our life. And so we align ourselves in spirit so we can take aligned, harmonious, heavenly action in our life and act more heavenly in our earthly life. So that way, because when we act more heavenly, one, we're aligning ourselves more with our energy of our soul, and we're going to feel better about ourselves. We're going to feel better about the actions we take. We're going to be more proud of who we are. And we're going to be serving the well-being of heart over serving our cravings and desires that really are feeding our unconscious pain, or really feeding our unconscious desires for pleasure that are out of alignment with our well-being of our heart. And so spirituality is I connect with my spirit so I can live the most aligned heavenly life on earth, experiencing heaven through my cells and my body. And you can do that through there's so many different ways to connect to spirit. One could be I just set positive intentions, and maybe I set an intention of every time I look at my phone, may greater harmony and peace flow to all. May every time I turn on light, I awaken greater light within all of humanity. Right? Then your actions, even if you forget about the intentions you set, have more intention and meaning behind them. Or may every time I turn on the sink, I fill this planet with greater heavenly light. May every time I chop a fruit or vegetable, I chop greater love and light in the hearts within the hearts of all. That's one way to connect with spirit. Another way would just to pray. Pray for what you want to experience in your life. Pray for what you hope others around you experience in their life. Pray for greater abundance, prosperity, and ease for all. Pray for world peace. Another way to connect with spirit. A third way would be to do breath work. A fourth way would be to do intentional movement like qigong or yoga. Another way to connect to spirit would to be meditation, or I'm really into visualizations because I feel like it gives you a little bit more of a bang for your buck than just sitting and meditating. But with connecting with spirit, you almost have to think about your spiritual practices as like a workout. And if you overdo a workout, right, eventually you start breaking down your muscles, breaking down your body, rather than helping your body become stronger. And it's the same with spirituality. If you overdo spirituality, it actually connects us. It actually becomes too much for our body to ground and anchor into itself. And then we get so altered in our spirituality that makes us have a hard time being present in our humanness. And this is something I've had a lot of experience with because, like, I've devoted my life to spirituality. I do spiritual practices every day. And also, especially like right now, I'm looking for a job. It's like I got a lot of free time. And I've really explored, okay, how much spiritual practice is too much spiritual practice, and even if I'm doing too much, is that still helping or hurting me? And I would say after going through maybe like a couple years of really playing with a little too much spiritual practice, is that if it's taking away from how focused or how you're able to move forward in your life, it's actually too much spirituality and not enough attention on what you need to get done in your day. And so, like, for me, like, what I've really noticed is when I overdo spiritual practice is that there's a tendency for me to feel scattered. There's a tendency for there's a tendency to crave stimulation, because spirituality, when you're connecting to light, stimulates your nervous system. But when you overdo that, it becomes over level of stimulation for your body. And then when that becomes a pattern of overdoing spirituality, you then crave overstimulation in other ways. And for me, that always shows up as technology addiction. And a great way to know if I overdid my spiritual practice is if I overdo it, I tend to really crave staring at my phone or scrolling on Instagram for the rest of the day or for a lot of the day after that. And so I've really started to learn, okay, if I want to be a functioning human, I have to find balance in my spiritual practice. And I can't be devoting too much time to spirituality and then not able to get things I need to get done in my life. And we also find that when we overdo our spiritual practices, that there's a tendency, it kind of like lifts the anchor that that like if almost like you were a boat, and regularly as you move through your life you have an anchor that really keeps you present in your body. If you overdo spirituality, it kind of lifts the anchor, and so then we find ourselves maybe oversensitive. We find ourselves getting really swayed by how people either by how people are relating to us, or maybe someone like says they don't want to hang out with us. We tend to feel overly emotional about that. Or I've even had like in the past where I've like done spiritual practices and then gone to a job interview, and I couldn't, in that job interview I was super nervous and I didn't feel like I could regulate my nervous system, because when you are over connecting to spirituality, it actually dysregulates your nervous system because it's too much stimulation or too much of an altered state for your body, and it leads us having a hard time regulating, or and actually leads us to being a little bit more reactive and a little bit more agitated in our day. And if someone triggers us, we tend to even be a little bit more easily triggered when we've overdone or overstimulated by how much light we're consuming. And so it's really important to find balance in our spiritual practice, so that way we can be balanced and we can stay grounded in our root, no matter how others are relating to us, or no matter what maybe like things we might be experiencing that day that might make us already feel a little bit more nervous, or a little bit more like uplifted or excited. But when we can't ground because we've overdone our spiritual practice, right, we're then having a really hard time stepping into our life. And we'll also find, just with spiritual practice, if we overdo it, that we will have a really hard time focusing on whatever we want to get done that day. Because when you're over connecting to spirituality, it's like too much heaven and not enough humanness. And then we have a really hard time stepping into our humanness. And so when I think about spirituality, even this week, like, it's still something I'm kind of playing with, of like, okay, what does balanced spiritual practice look like, and how much can I do where it's like helping me grow and evolve and helping me accelerate my healing journey. Because when you're connecting to the wholeness, the love, the unity of heaven, right, it is bringing greater wholeness, unity, and love to your body. And it's just not about overdoing it, so that we can still be human, so that we can still have a human life. And so for me, like even this week, I was like, there's a teacher I really like who does visualizations, Alunia Noel, and she came out with like two visualizations that in total were like an hour and then 45 minutes. And I was like, what if I mashed them together and did an hour or 45 of visualizations? And while after doing that, I felt really peaceful. And I also felt like I have a couple of injuries, like I have an injured knee, injured shoulder. And it felt really supportive for my injured knee and injured shoulder. After doing that, like back to back for an hour 45, I had a super hard time focusing for the rest of my day, and like was overlooking on Instagram and just could not focus at all. and and felt completely knocked out of balance and got nothing done for the rest of the day. And while my injuries felt better, and while I felt rather peaceful, I then felt rather not peaceful by how much I was craving the stimulation of technology addiction. Because when you overstimulate yourself with light, you're going to crave overstimulation in other areas of your life. And so I learned, and today I did just an hour visualization and was able to get like anything I wanted to get done today done. And a great way to know if we're grounded is like, how well are we? The simple ways is to say, how well am I keeping my apartment clean? How well am I addressing the things I need to get done in my day? And if I'm having a hard time focusing, or having a hard time keeping my apartment clean, or having a hard time getting things I need to get done, I might be a little ungrounded, because I might maybe have done a little too much spiritual practice that day. And so really, I feel like if we're going to do meditation or visualization, no more than an hour. And if you have injuries and you want to help those injuries heal a little bit, you would be better off just doing an hour every day rather than trying to do like 2 hours. And while your injuries might feel better. You probably have a really hard time focusing for the rest of your day. And if you're like, well, I had a super busy weekend and my knees really feeling swollen and it really just needs some rest, so I'm going to do this visualization. I'm going to do 2 hours of visualization. Fine, but being aware of we really probably don't need anything more than an hour to align ourselves with spirit and then be aligned in how we take action through the rest of our day. And also, if we do spiritual practice at night, probably not something that I then need to do spiritual practice first thing in the morning the next day either, right? Good. We have to give ourselves time to digest our experiences and time to digest our light, and we do that by focusing on creating the life we want to live and addressing the challenges and hardships we're going through, and working to find solutions for them. And right, if we're avoiding challenge and hardships, we're most likely not going to find a solution for that hardship. And so we connect to our spirituality, so we become more conscious, and we it helps heal our attachment style when we're doing it in balance, that then allows us to face and feel things that are hard or challenging in a more balanced and harmonious way, where we feel more safe and secure to step into things that are uncomfortable and find our way through it rather than trying to run or avoid from those problems. And so just if we do an hour visualization in the morning or meditation in the morning, doesn't mean we can't pray later in the day or set positive intentions, or it doesn't mean that has to be our only spiritual practice. And I tend to find like setting positive intentions or praying to be a little less potent than sitting and meditating, because you're still, like, for me, when I pray, I'm like walking somewhere, or I'm like, or like I'm setting positive intentions as I'm washing the dishes, and it's like I'm doing things, so I'm not touching in so much of a deep state. And so like, you can pray, like if you did an hour meditation in the morning, you could probably still pray for like an hour or 2 hours, depending on how much time time you have walking places, or how much time you have getting chores done in your house. And just like, may every time I wash my windows, may I wipe greater love into the hearts of all. Like, just setting intentions during that day is like a really simple way to connect with spirit through the actions we take in our day, and aligning ourselves more in spirituality without really overdoing it. And like, for me, what I typically find is like, if I do a visualization or meditation in the morning, that I can, yeah, I can probably pray for like a good solid another 45 minutes, or maybe even like probably close to 2 hours, without really knocking myself too out of balance. And probably after the 2 hour mark, it starts to become a little too much. And so we just have to listen to our body, and we have to listen to, does this feel like it's too much, or does this feel like it's aligned? And we can even lean into too much a little, but if we're leaning into too much every day, that's when we usually start to find problems. And for me, like, if I start to feel a really strong sensation in my third eye as I'm praying, I tend to just pray through it, because I recognize that it's okay to push ourselves a little. It's okay to push through discomfort a little. It's just about giving ourselves breaks to digest our experiences, just like working out. It's okay to really push yourself working out, but if then you eat the proper meal you need to eat, maybe you at night you read a book and kind of give your body time to rest and digest the workout, so that way our body's rebuilt. And it's the same with our spiritual practices. Our nervous systems gets rebuilt. Our nervous system learns how to integrate light a little bit better for the next time we step into spirituality. And I just want to emphasize that it's more about, can I align myself in action rather than just focusing on connecting with spirit. And we're most likely going to be better served in our life if we're more focused on taking aligned action than we are on always pushing the max of our spiritual practice every day. And something that kind of can agitate me sometimes is like spiritual teachers. All right, like I watch different spiritual teachers on podcasts and stuff like that. And the spiritual teachers that maybe come across as like more gruff, aggressive, maybe they're not really allowing the interviewer to get words in, and they kind of are coming across as a, a, a person with a very big spiritual ego that just happens to know fancy spiritual terms. And really, when you're aligned in spirituality and you're actually using spirituality to take aligned action in your life and you're not overdoing meditation and visualization, right? It will soften the petals of your heart, and then you'll start to speak in a way that isn't disturbing the petals of other people's hearts and is actually giving, and you're resting in presence so much that you're allowed, that you feel comfortable giving other people space to talk and speak. And I'm human. I'm not going to say I'm some master spiritual teacher, right? I'm on the path. I am working towards becoming more masterful. Don't always get it perfect. Sometimes I overlook at technology or scroll on Instagram. Sometimes I have struggled keeping my apartment clean. Like, I'm human. I'm struggling looking for a job right now. Like, I'm human just like anyone else. No means a master, but recognizing if we are listening to someone and we're wondering how masterful they are, how gently are they speaking to people? How much space do they give people space to talk? How accepting and forgiving are they of people? Or are they trying to dominate a room and using a bunch of big spiritual terms as a way of trying to show how much they know? Right? And Jesus said the meek will inherit the earth. And what that means is the beings that are aligned with our heart. And when we overdo spirituality, right, our heart becomes too sensitive, and then we become overprotective of it, or we feel like we can't live in the world. And when we're living and aligned with spirituality, we're sensitive enough towards our heart that where we feel how our words are aligned with our truth, aligned with the actions, and we feel how our actions are aligned with what we want to do moving forward, and we're able to feel that sensitivity without being overwhelmed by it. And like even this morning, today, I had an interview at a grocery store place, and one of the questions they asked me, my heart kind of called me out on this, was that they asked me like, where do you see yourself in a couple of years? And if I were to be fully honest, I would say I see myself in a couple of years as a spiritual teacher. But for this interview, I was like, I see it at the store. And I felt in my heart contract, and I felt it, and it didn't feel good to my heart because I wasn't being fully honest. And I was trying to manipulate a little to try and get a second interview so I would no longer be unemployed, which, being unemployed is a lot of pressure, and it's not the most fun situation to be in. But and recognizing that when we are attuned to our heart will tell us when we're off, and our heart will tell us when, hey, you could have done that a little better right there. And so it's important to connect with your heart, because your heart will actually tell you what are the words and what are the actions that are aligned with who you actually are, what is true. Because when we recognize that no amount of manipulating or controlling is going to give us opportunities that work, right? Usually when we're manipulating and controlling to try and make certain opportunities happen, it's because we're not trusting life, and we're not trusting that we'll be taken care of, and we think we need to force things to work because otherwise we'll have nothing. And in truth, right, the things we force to work are usually the things that don't end up working for us. Hmm. And so a great way to see how aligned in my spiritual practice is how gently do I relate to myself? How gently is my diet on my body? How gently are the words I say to myself towards me? How gently do I relate to others? right? And can I work to embody more gentleness, because that is what's going to create the safety for our heart to open up more, and we'll start to become more aware of what are the words and actions that are aligned with my heart, and when am I moving out of alignment with our heart. And when we can embody our softness and gentleness is actually what starts to become the true sign of our mastery. And anyone we listen to as a teacher, okay, are they treating their body? How well are they taking care of their body? How gently and softly do they speak to themselves and others? And when we can align ourselves in softness and gentleness, we start to become more intuitive, we start to become more psychic, because when you're soft and gentle with yourself, it creates the space for you to listen deeper. It creates the space for you to hear where life is trying to guide you, and it will allow you to hear the whispers of your heart that are telling you how to move forward or how to share greater love with people. Mm. And so, can we inspire to the world needs a lot of help, right? We're on a world right now with a lot of problems. And if we really wish to be the greatest masters, what new action steps can we take responsibility for our life? And if we're crushing life and crushing taking responsibility for our life, okay, how can I help the people around me more? How can I help the community around me more? And how can I make sure that I'm leaving an impact of love on this planet? Because any soul that ascends from earth ascends because of the legacy of love they left on this planet, by how many people that soul or that human ended up helping, healing, and guiding into greater levels of peace, healing, connection to their divinity. And if we truly wish to be the greatest masters we can be, it isn't so much about how much spirituality I do, but how many people did I help? And how well did I live my day to day life where I was spreading greater peace and love and kindness and respect to the people I got to interact with every day? And how much was I devoted to making sure this world was a better place rather than just taking care of myself? Or rather just only focusing on working, fixing, and healing myself, right? How many people did I help heal? And what you realize as you start to work with others is when you facilitate group healings, you receive the healing as well. And if we really want to be our most healed version of ourselves, we're going to heal 10 times faster if we can find ways to help heal groups rather than just only working on healing ourselves. Or even if we're working with clients, the healing we give our clients is healing we also receive. And so if you want to be your greatest master, you have to be working to help others. And if you want to be the best spiritual student, the best spiritual students are the ones that teach, right? Because then you really learn the material. And I have learned so much more about spirituality from teaching it than just studying it. And I was a great student. I would listen to teachers every day for years and years and years. For like, ever since I found Matt Kahn when I was 21, and I'm 20, almost 28 now, and would listen to him every day. Everything that he put out, I would listen to multiple times. And what I've learned is I've learned so much more teaching spirituality and I've brought my life into more balance and harmony teaching spirituality than I ever did as a student. And so if we really want to learn spirituality, start to teach, start to help others, start to take aligned action in our life of how can I lead the greatest level of impact of love, compassion, and care to the people around me, to my community, because that's why we came to this earth. It wasn't to hyper fixate on meditating and focusing on connecting to divinity only for ourselves and ignoring the rest of our life or the rest of the lives of all. It's how many people can I help and heal, because that is how high of a master you'll become after you leave this life. And so I hope that helps. Thank you for listening and have a great day. Bye.